If you want to learn more about the topics of today's episode, visit the podcast website at naturesecretservice.com. Thanks for listening. Okay, people, listen up. Here we go. This is Nature's Secret Service, the podcast that puts you in the room with the men and women of wildlife law enforcement. I'm your host, Ed Newcomer, and we are in the middle of season 3 about wolves, and I'm happy to welcome back former U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Special Agent Corky Roberts. You might remember Corky from episode 8 of season 1. He's a former state officer with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and then for many years was a special agent with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, former supervisor, agent, all-around great guy. Corky, thanks for being back on the podcast. I appreciate it.
It's great to be here, Ed. Looking forward to it.
Yes, and one of the great things about having great former agents on the show is that they often are involved in multiple good cases. So back in season 1, you were on and you talked to us about that amazing case that you had in Washington involving a woman who smuggled a live monkey into the U.S. from Thailand in a pregnancy prosthetic, and that was like the bread and butter of what I was used to working on in Los Angeles. But the cool thing about where you were is you got a really interesting diversity of cases. And yeah, you worked on a smuggling case involving a monkey, but you also worked on a wolf case. And that case is what we're calling today the Omak wolf case. Before we jump into that, Corky, I want you to tell the story, but I just want to remind listeners and watchers that we have been talking a lot about the reintroduction of wolves into the lower 48 United States in 1995, starting in Yellowstone National Park. But it's important to always remember that wolves have been protected under the Endangered Species Act going back to the earliest days of the Act. They were listed in the 1967 version, and then when the Act was amended in 1973, they were also listed as threatened in the lower 48 then. So even prior to reintroduction in Yellowstone, wolves, if a wolf somehow appeared in the lower 48 United States, it had protection under the Endangered Species Act. So I think that's an important thing to remember, because the protection didn't just magically appear when they were reintroduced. And there were occasions where wolves did naturally come in to the United States from Canada, particularly into the northern areas of Washington and things like that. Let me ask you something. As an agent who was working up there, what would happen if a wolf crossed the border? I've already mentioned that, like snapping your fingers, they have protection. But tell me, like, when you were working up there, what were the rumors? What were people saying about wolves that were naturally migrating down into the U.S. from Canada?
When I was a state game warden, the late 70s, or not, I would say late 80s and early 90s, I was in the far southwest corner of the state. But there were rumors of wolves, in the northern Cascades, which is right in this area where we're going to be talking about later. And that's some remote country. You have British Columbia right above that. And, of course, there's wolves there for sure. And they have hunting seasons for them and everything. But once that wolf steps across that border, he or she is protected.
Right.
Now that Endangered Species Act kicks in, and it's forbidden to take one.
Right.
And we never. I mean, granted, I was pretty good ways removed from this. And it was before email and text messaging and all that. And so I didn't really hear things about people being angry about it or,
right,
alarmed that the wolves are coming to steal all our livestock. I just, heard there was wolves there.
Right.
That was about the extent of it.
Yeah, also during that time there were not like game cameras everywhere. Camera traps were like not
No,
even
what
invented
was
yet.
that?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
There was a picture you took. Yeah.
Exactly. They were all based on maybe sightings of tracks or scat, or maybe some isolated sighting by somebody who knew what they were talking
Yeah.
about. What?
Howling,
Yeah, howling. What was the reaction of like the responsible agencies at the time? Like if they heard a rumor that a wolf, wolves or a wolf had crossed the border. We're talking about Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. What was their reaction?
Like I said earlier, back then in the late 80s and early 90s, I don't know. I had no clue. We didn't
Yeah.
have like a biologist coming, calling us on the phone or sending out an email. Oh my God, wolves are here.
Right.
Later on, when I moved back to Washington in 2006, there was a little bit more of a reaction when you had a report from either the public or state officer or police officer, whatever. It was quite a, I would get a call and, you know, from a state game warden or something. Hey, got a report of a dead wolf up on, highway such and such near Colville. And of course, I was down in the southern part of the state. And on several occasions, I'd call up a contact, with the Ecological Services office in Spokane. Now, it's a hybrid. Well, how do you know that? Because there's no wolves here. How do you know that? I just know it's a hybrid. And I mean, that was a pretty routine answer. And I don't remember there being, I know there were hybrid wolves in Washington. People had them,
Sure.
They were everywhere. But yeah, I was like, you got these wolves that were just released over in Idaho and they're multiplying over there. I don't think Washington has an iron curtain that prevents them from coming over here, but what did I know? And but I was several times I got that standard answer. It's a hybrid.
Kind of the knee jerk answer, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And
now, my fault. I never went up and tried to find this thing, and I never got a sample from them, so I really can't say for sure at that point until this time.
Till this case. But in the same sense, they weren't going out to take a sample; they were just making a guess.
Right.
So before we get on to the case, though, this is kind of an interesting thing because when you say ecological services, what you're talking about is ecological services within the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So same agency that you and I were in, but these are like, we were the law enforcement, those are the biologists. And for anybody who's not an employee of the service, you might not kind of intuitively know, those divisions are different. They have, we had line authority, which means our chain of command was only law enforcement. They had their own chain of command, and they were often physically located in different offices than we were. So we actually didn't normally interact with the biologists of the service, right?
Right.
So all in the same team, but not working together every day. Why? What was the motivation? See, I think what you're getting at here is, my sense is that what you're saying is ecological services like almost didn't want wolves to be in Washington. Why do you think that was?
I should clarify when I say ecological services. There was just maybe a couple of 2 or 3 biologists that I knew well enough, had on speed dial, for lack of a better term.
Right.
And I can't say the entire division was going, yeah, no, they're all hybrid wolves. But I know these 2 or 3 were like, yeah, they're hybrids. And I think a lot of it was they didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And if there were wolves here, and it's not that they were afraid of work. It's just, it was very controversial work.
Yeah.
And then you got the press, and you're going to have people knocking on the door and phone calls all the time to answer. And it would have been an increase in the workload dramatically.
Yeah. That's kind of that's my guess too, is what you were, hinting at, is that, like you said, they weren't afraid of work, but it's just like they knew what was happening over in Idaho and Wyoming and Montana, where wolf reintroduction was getting controversial, or at least there were wolf haters out there. Yeah. And nobody wants to come to work and take those angry phone calls, right?
Right.
We've all had them. Anyway, let's jump now to, I believe, late December 2008, and let's talk about this case you did that we're calling the Omak Wolf. Um, Interestingly, I remember that when you were on the podcast the last time, it was around a holiday that you were working.
This was almost a year to the day. And I told you the monkey case was I was sitting there in the office, nobody around, my feet kicked up, my phone rings, and my life changed.
Right, right around Christmas.
Yeah. And this was like 2 days before Christmas, and I was at home, and I got a call, from a state game warden at December 23rd, 2008, and he proceeded to tell me about a package of a FedEx drop shipment in Walmart in Omak, Washington, that was bleeding.
Always
like, this could be interesting.
Yeah.
That's and, the story goes the owner of the FedEx place called the local police department, the Omak Police Department, said, FedEx delivery guy or pickup guy wouldn't take this shipment because the box is bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Omak comes over there and they look at it. Now they open up this box and there's an unknown animal hide in there. So first person they call, local game warden.
Right.
He comes out looking at this thing and he's like, wolf. And he calls me. He just said it looked like a wolf. And he calls me and I'm on the phone. And I said, measure the paws.
Oh, nice.
And he says, they're about 3 inches. I said, you got a wolf.
Yeah, not a coyote.
No, not a coyote.
Yeah.
And I said, where's it? He says, can I take it? What? And I said, where's it going? He says, it's going to Canada. I said, oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a, that's a, border exception to the search rule. And so here we go. And he took it and, photographed it and that kind of thing. I think you have some of the pictures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll put those on the website.
Yeah, and he took some samples from it and things, and he interviewed the store clerk, and who said, a lady had come in earlier that afternoon and wanted to ship this box to Canada, and so he told her, it's going to cost this much, and it'll go out now, and she said, I think I want to go over to the post office to see if I can ship it there because it might be less expensive and maybe they can get it out sooner. Okay. So she goes to the post office. Well, by the time she got back, it was too late for that day's shipment, but she just left it.
Got it.
And the interesting thing was she put a Canadian address on it to a guy named Ralph Browson up there in Hardisty, Alberta, and left the phone number, the name and phone number, and the shipper on the label was the guy himself, the guy that runs that FedEx place. But that was easily explained away later. And so, of course, anybody that thinks they're not under surveillance when they go in Walmart probably needs to rethink that because they keep those DVDs, and we got the game warden got the DVDs, and here comes a lady walking into Walmart with a white box, and she's got a very distinct ski jacket with a maroon stripe on it.
Now, let me back you up for just a second. Walmart, is there like a FedEx facility in the Walmart?
Yeah, a FedEx drop facility. Yeah, you can see them in most Walmarts.
Yeah.
There's a FedEx drop spot there.
And there's a couple of things I think are interesting here from an investigator's point of view. So, like you mentioned, this border search exception. So when somebody puts something in the mail or in FedEx and it's addressed out of the country, and they relinquish control of it, it's essentially on its way to that country. And Fish and Wildlife Service agents do have customs authority. And we could seize it at that point if we thought there was a violation taking place. But for listeners, some of my listeners are very savvy about this stuff. But what are the violations you're looking at? What violations do you think occurred that would give you federal jurisdiction at this point?
Well, first off, Endangered Species Act, wolf is listed as an endangered animal. It's being sent, in interstate or foreign commerce.
Right.
So you got that. You got the Lacey Act, which is the act prohibiting the import, export of illegally taken wildlife.
Right.
You have to assume, you can pretty well assume you got probable cause to believe this animal was taken illegally because it's in a box.
Right.
It's shipped in Omak and been shipped to another country. Smuggling goods out of the United States.
Right.
False labeling is another part of the Lacey Act. And that was going there with the names and stuff that the lady gave. But,
and I assume the box did not say contents wolf pelt,
it
right?
did not say wolf. It said rug.
Rug. Yeah. Okay. So
bleeds.
First of all, a bleeding package. That's what we call in the detective business a clue, right? You're onto something. But so right. Well, what I think is really interesting about these cases is right there, just in this moment of these few investigative steps that have happened, there's a lot of crimes in play here, right? Mm-hmm. And some of them pretty serious. Smuggling is a serious felony. I think outbound smuggling, the maximum penalty is up to 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. So it's really amazing how quickly, if you're a good investigator, you start like going through the laws that might be in play here. So, you've got jurisdiction, you have potentially serious crime, and, it's an endangered species, which is a very high priority for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service law enforcement, because it's law enforcement plays a role in recovering these species. So I think that was important to go over because now we know you're off and running. And, and the cool thing is, these steps that you're taking to just start methodically narrowing it down. So you've got this footage now shows this woman going in, but there's no sender address on this or return address. So how the heck do you figure out who this person is?
The return address was the guy that ran the FedEx place. And he said FedEx set up his computer to do that, but she had given him a name of Allison and a phone number.
Okay.
And I guess I better go back first, and we'll come back to this.
Okay.
When the Omak Police Department opened that box and they saw it was being shipped to a guy in Canada, there was a phone number on there and an address. They called it. They called the guy, which when I heard that, I was just like,
yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know why, but why? Why did that upset you?
In the long run, it worked out beautifully, but it immediately it's like, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
And so anyway, I've talked to the officer since then, and he's like, I don't know why I did that,
but explain to people why that would be like for an investigator.
Now they know whoever's supposed to receive this package, you presume that he would know that it's coming, is going to get on the phone and he's going to call whoever, shipped it, and they're going to try to go underground, which is really hard to do when you're on a Walmart surveillance camera.
Yeah, but still now if they know you're after them, you're playing catch up. Yeah. Okay.
Starting to hide evidence.
Exactly.
And then, we also had her walking out of the store getting into a red SUV. This is another lesson I learned. So a red SUV, you got, it looks like a Ford Explorer. I didn't realize how many SUVs look like Ford Explorers. There are dozens. Oh, man, we started, how many maroon SUVs are registered in Okanagan County? Like 3,000. I can't remember what the numbers were, but it was astronomical. And so we're like, oh, no, here we go. This is going to be a nightmare. And, so we're getting all this evidence together. They've collected it all. And then finally, after the holidays, I can't remember if I had a vacation plan that they did or something, but we all got together after the holidays up there, and we had a briefing, and we go through the evidence and do the transfers of the hides and the samples and all this kind of thing. And we're trying to figure out how are we going to identify these people. And I had called some contacts up in Alberta, with the Canadian Wildlife Service at that point, Environment Canada. And, got some information about the supposed recipient, Ralph Browson. Phone numbers matched, everything matched. He was a hunter. And an interesting thing is he had a host license in 2007, which allows a resident of Alberta to take a non-resident moose hunting, big game hunting, without having to hire a guide. But they have to get a host license.
Okay.
And his client, or hostee, or whatever you want to call him, was a guy named William White in Twisp, Washington.
Okay.
At that point, there's William White. No idea.
Yep. Right. Just a name.
Whatever. So this is where so we're at this meeting with all the local game wardens and stuff, and we're talking about these SUV and how we're going to figure this out. And one of the game wardens, a guy named Cal Tresser, who'd been up in Twisp area for, before it was civilized, I think. Yeah. And he'd been there forever. And he says, Ralph Browson, he says, I checked that guy several years ago. He said he was from Canada, and he was up here hound hunting with a guy named Bill White. He was going to buy some dogs from me. He remembered the whole story. And here's Bill White again. Now Ralph's down here. Things are starting to come together.
I cannot tell you how many times that happened to me in my career. I don't know if it goes back to, that old saying, God loves game wardens, or what, or whether it's just, honestly, I don't think that's a fun thing to say, but honestly, what I think it comes down to is good police work, because that happened to me so many times where you're in a group of law enforcement officers, multi-agency, and you're just going over what everybody's got. And inevitably, somebody remembers a name from a year, 2, 5 years ago, and they just are smart enough to say, I ran into a guy once, and that is the next thing that needs to be done. It's so amazing how often that happens, that just good law enforcement officers kind of keep track of what's going on in their district, and they end up just giving you the best information that nobody ever could have seen coming as important, It
is. And it's just funny to me that you have, most people, most hunters, fishermen, whatever, go almost their entire fishing career, life experience, whatever, hunting, fishing experience, never get checked by a game warden.
Right.
Never. And then here we are, we're all together, and these two clowns, they're in the memory bank of this local game warden in Twisp, Washington.
I just think it's one of the coolest things about being in law enforcement, and I think it really illustrates the importance of building interagency relationships.
Oh, yeah.
and communicating, and not acting like this is my case and it's all secret. If you sharing information and talking to other law enforcement agencies and having a relationship, somebody you can call, it results in the game warden calling you when they find a bloody package. It results in you finding out some small piece of information that nobody thought was important until this very moment. I just think that is so awesome. Anyway, I love hearing about it, because it's just the thrill of investigations when you hit those moments. So, okay, so this is kind of, sorry to interrupt. I just had to talk about that.
That's all right. So Cal, he's talking about this white guy, and he says, I know Bill White. He's a hunter instructor. He's, I deal with him frequently. I see him. I drink coffee with him, that kind of thing. He said, he's the first guy to ever get wolves on camera, on a trail camera, on his property on the Lookout Mountain. I'm like, oh my God, what that's called? A clue.
Yeah, another clue.
Another clue.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
When this happened, he wrote to the, state fish and wildlife. These wolves, they're evil. They should, I can't remember what all he said, but he was not in favor of it.
Wait a minute. And so Bill White, this landowner, the first guy to record wolves kind of naturally migrating back into Washington. Where were they? Like on his property or something?
On his property, right near there. He called it Lookout Mountain Ranch. It's 400 or 500 acres there near Twisp, Washington.
And he reported. He puts this in writing.
Got trail camera photos of wolves. And excellent photos. And he didn't write to the game department. He wrote the press, of course. Wolves are bad,
Right.
But then the game department picked up on it and got a hold of him, and they corresponded a little bit, and he was never favorable. He wouldn't let him on his property. Forest Service and Fish and Wildlife and state, no, you can't come on my property, that kind of thing. So he was anti-wolf. That was pretty obvious.
Okay.
but so it was starting to look, okay, we're getting close. Well, then Cal said, oh, yeah, and he's got a son and a daughter-in-law that live on the property just up the road from him, Tom and Aaron.
Okay.
All right, Aaron. Wonder what Aaron looks like. Well, we got a driver's license photo, and voila.
It's the same woman.
Now, here's the term I use. She looked very similar to the same woman that entered the wall.
Okay.
So, search warrant time. And I got email addresses, I got phone numbers, contact information from them, and so at the same, like 2 days later, the game warden who called this in to me, I get a call from him. He was driving up over Loop Pass, which is between Omak and Twist, and he sees a red SUV coming over the hill with a lady in it, and all he gets is the first 3 numbers of the license plate. He writes them down. And to his credit, he called Washington State Patrol and said, hey, can you tell me how many red SUVs have this license number? They're like 3,000 or something in the state. How about in Okanagan County? 3.
Nice.
And the one came back, Lincoln Navigator, which was not one of the cars we've been looking at, but
similar.
Registered to Tom and Aaron White. So,
Beautiful.
And so yeah, it's just starting to look good. So anyway,
so look, I got to stop you one more time, because is this the same game warden who intercepted the FedEx package?
Yes.
So that's also cool, because you had a good enough relationship with that person that they're invested in your case and they're keeping their eye out. Funny thing though, that was a game warden named Troy McCormick, right?
Yeah.
I knew Troy from my time when I lived in Washington and was an assistant attorney general. He was a brand new state game warden. He, and I, very dedicated game warden who really,
yes, he may still be on. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. I'm not in touch with him, but he was, highly motivated. So I'm not surprised that he would take the time to do this extra work. Yeah. Okay. So now you're looking good. You've got, wolves tied to Bill White's property. You know that Tom and his wife live on the property. His wife drives the same kind of car that was seen going to and from the FedEx and the postal. And the photo of her driver's license, I assume, looks very similar to the photo from the surveillance camera. That's looking good. That's looking good.
Yeah, it is. It's looking real good. And so I shipped the hide and the samples off to the forensics lab, and it was a pretty quick turnaround. They got back to me and said, yeah, that's a wolf. Good. Yeah, that's a wolf. It seems like it's probably an Alaska wolf. And they have ways, the way they do that, don't ask me to explain that. It's wolf. But they can narrow it down pretty well. And it came back later to something a little bit different, but not too far off. But that was months down the road. Okay. But anyways, so we got a wolf, we got the property, we got possible suspects, we got possible identity, search warrant time. Yeah. And so I did the email accounts, I did the preservation letters, to basically what a preservation letter does is, you send it in to CentryTel, Gmail, AOL, whoever, and say, freeze this account. And they don't, when I say freeze, they don't freeze it. They don't say no more. They just basically take a snapshot of the records associated with that account at that time they get that letter. Right. So in anticipation, they're going to get a warrant at a later date. Right. And so did all that and got the warrant sent in and got some phone record requests for Bill's phone number. And Canada was working on the Canadian side of this thing. And I get this warrant. That U.S. attorney looks at it and, we're ready to go. And I take it into the magistrate. She reads the entire thing and says, I'm not going to sign this. That's a first. And I was like, this has never happened to me. I don't know what to do here. I mean, it was like devastating. Yeah. I thought, oh my gosh. And I said, okay, what's wrong with it, Judge? And she said, this comment about she closely resembled the person in the Walmart, that ain't going to do it. I'm like,
What?
yeah. And it was just, grainy photo and stuff from the Walmart. The
Yeah.
driver's license photo was perfect. So I got a friend of mine at the Benton County Sheriff's Department helped me put together a photo montage.
Okay.
And I sent it up to Sergeant Jim Brown up with the Washington Game Department. I said, can you go talk to Mr. Extra or the guy at the FedEx place and let's see what happens. And,
good idea.
I've done several of these, and I was always nervous. They're looking at, well, I don't know, and they point to the wrong one. So it's like, oh, no. But Jim said he laid that thing down. Boop, yep, right there. That's her.
Nice.
And like, okay.
So we're
back in business.
We're back in business. So a couple of things there. First of all, for law enforcement listeners, they're going to know to get a search warrant, you have to have a probable cause. That's it. That's it. And that just means facts or circumstances that would lead you to believe that a crime had occurred and that there's evidence going to be found where you want to search. So that's not that big of a burden to do. So, and it's unusual that a judge or magistrate judge would decline a search warrant. But actually, I think it's kind of good, Corky, because it reminds people that there is a check and a balance watching law enforcement to make sure that we don't just bust into somebody's home or go snooping around in their email unless we can show somebody else, a judge, that we have probable cause to believe we're going to find evidence of a crime there. So it's not just like Corky Roberts goes snooping around in somebody's house or their email account or their bank, No. You have to get a warrant. So I think the judge was wrong there, but it is a nice reminder that law enforcement does not go unchecked in this country, and which is that's important to us as law enforcement officers. We don't want to run unchecked. We shouldn't.
It is. There's been enough information out the last few weeks, months, whatever, that about agents serving warrants. And most people don't understand this. Getting a search warrant is not like see on television where, we need a search warrant, write it down, and you go get it signed. No, this is weeks. I mean, it sometimes takes weeks to put all this together. And this did. This took weeks, and so it's not something that's very easy to do in the review process. U.S. attorney. Some of these are 30, 40 pages long.
Right.
The review process is pretty intensive too. So it was a lesson for me, a good lesson. And but in the long run, it also turned out good because we got to go back and visit with this guy.
Yeah.
And we got some more information that helped us further down the road. And so it was actually a plus to be able to do that.
It tightened up your case, and kudos to you for not just giving up. You're like, all right, well, I'll show you. I'm going to go get some better evidence, which is good. And you used what's called a photo lineup, which, like you, whenever I used a photo lineup, I always had like this moment in my stomach where I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to pick the wrong person? But basically what you're doing is you're putting out the picture of this woman, Ms. White, who you suspect went in there, but you're mixing it in with this probably driver's license photos of other people in Washington State who look similar to her. Same type of haircut, same, complexion, same details, and you put them all in maybe a 6 or 12 person lineup, and it's called a photo lineup.
Yeah.
And it's always a relief when your witness positively IDs the person. But you have to be really careful when you present it to them. You can't do anything that would give them a hint. Yeah.
And your photo lineup, like I said, has to be similar. You can't have, 5 African American females, one, white female in there. It's like, oh my God, they have to be very similar.
Yeah,
and it's scary. You start to look at these pictures, going, they look alike.
I know. You start to get nervous, like who she is, but you wonder if somebody else might be confused. So that's good. So he immediately IDs her. That goes. Now I assume you've got rock solid probable cause, right?
Yeah. Now it was not an issue, and we did the same because most of our information was for Bill White. Tom White and his wife she was just the delivery agent of this thing, but still,
right.
There could be evidence in our house of blood, hair, skinning knives, rifles, skull. Yeah, skull's a big one.
Yeah.
Or it could be at either place because they got Bill White's place there, and he's been corresponding back and forth. And I don't know if I said it earlier, but when we got the phone records, when that Omak officer called the number in Canada, and I'm like, oh my God. Well, guess what phone call we found about 10 minutes after the Omak officer called the guy in Canada.
Beautiful.
We had a number back to Bill White's house,
Perfect.
phone call. Yeah, it was like ching ching, here we are.
Yeah, and who'd have thought of that? That actually is kind of a brilliant outcome, right? The cop.
It did.
Yeah.
After that, I was thankful the guy called him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful because it definitely kind of leans toward, culpability there. If the first thing you do after you get a call from a cop is warn the person, right?
Yeah, it looks kind of
a little suspicious.
Yeah.
That's another clue. Okay. All right. So,
anyway, 2 days later, we got teams together and we went and served search warrants on Tom White, Bill White's property, outbuildings, vehicles, computers were the big one. And, this is one of those things, there was 2 fish and wildlife agents in eastern Washington at that time and 4 over in western Washington. Is not near enough people.
Mm-mm.
We had, the state game warden, there was 3 or 4 of them in the area, but still, you're searching 2 houses, 2 properties. And so, plus Fish and Wildlife Service, as you know, didn't have a computer forensic specialist.
Right.
And so I had a contact I'd worked with before on the monkey case, an ICE agent, and he came along and handled the computer issues.
Awesome.
And that was wonderful to have him on board. But I was on the team that did Bill's house, and Agent Furr, who was also on your season 1 stuff, was on the team that led the team that did Tom's house.
Awesome.
And I remember when we drove up to Bill's house, and people think search warrants, kick doors in and stuff, and it was basically he's standing there on the porch, howdy. Hey, how you got done? Yeah, Bill, we got a search warrant for your place. And, oh, shoot, okay. It was just like this happened every day. We were coming by for dinner, and except his wife was not too pleased. She was like, this is because you wouldn't let the Forest Service and Fish and Wildlife biologists on your property. It's just retaliation. But, she quieted down. And so Jim Brown and I sat down at the table with Bill and started talking, and he started talking, and not a lot of truth.
I was just going to say, did he lie or did he tell the truth?
No, not a lot at all, but it was great because simultaneous we had Canadian officers up interviewing the guy in Canada.
Nice.
And so, we're a few minutes into this thing, and, Paul and Ray and I go outside, and then I come back in and say, you just want to stick with that story about not knowing anything about wolves getting killed? Huh? Yeah, because Ralph just said you did. Oh.
Nice.
Well, there's a couple of little finer points in there. The same thing. We talked to Bill about one thing, and he'd make up a story, and then Ralph was spilling. And
because
see Bill again, and pretty soon it's like, well, shucks,
because Ralph is, he's just a receiver. What, that one question that I know people are going to have is, and I did when I first started hearing about this case, and then it of course made sense to me. But why is somebody in the States sending a wolf pelt to Canada? There are wolves in Canada, so why would you do that?
That was one of the things that came up in the interview. And we suspected this anyway, is that they had killed this wolf and they wanted to get it mounted because they like taxidermy things. And, there was a few deer mounts and things around, and you ship it up to Canada. It's, you're laundering it basically because it's legal to kill wolves in Canada.
Gotcha.
Trap them, whatever. And so it shipping it up there to get tanned, and then it would be imported or brought back in.
I gotcha. So then, to be clear on that, at that time, I can't remember, Corky, were there exceptions in the Endangered Species Act for people that went to Canada and lawfully hunted wolves up there? Could they bring their trophy back?
Yeah, you could bring it back. Yeah. You could. I'm not sure if you needed to get a CITES too or not. If it was just
I don't know.
I can't remember right now.
So that's an important thing for people to remember too about the Endangered Species Act. There are always going to be exceptions and rules specific to individual species. So, like for example, just so people know, Endangered Species Act can list populations in a particular area of the country where those animals found in whatever the Northwest.
Black bear.
Yeah, Louisiana black bear, perfect example. For a long time, I'm not sure it still is, but for a long time was listed as threatened, while black bears in other parts of the country, of course, were not at all protected by the ESA. So there always were rules and exceptions that agents and everybody else has to be aware of. And one of those, I believe, was wolf hunting is legal in Canada, and there are lots of wolves up there. So anybody who could show that they lawfully went to Canada, lawfully killed a wolf, they could import it into the U.S. as long as they declared it properly, had all the right paperwork as a trophy. So that would make sense what he's trying to do. He's, like you said, he's laundering it. He's going to send it to Canada, have the taxidermied there, and then probably, I assume you found out the plan was he's going to import it back into the U.S., make it look like he killed it in Canada, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty smart.
Yeah.
Except for the bloody package.
Except being late for the FedEx delivery. That's right.
Exactly. Okay. And one other thing. I'm just curious. When you would do an interview at a search warrant, did you normally Mirandize people even though you weren't going to arrest them? I mean,
I normally didn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just because they weren't in custody.
Yeah.
But the state, if there was a state officer there, they always did.
They always did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I normally tried not to, but it's that.
I always found that, I ended up later in my career, I did it anytime, there was even a remote impression that they might not be free to leave, which during a search warrant, they are free to leave. You can leave. You just can't come back while we're there. But, yeah, I usually did, but that's agent prerogative. Did you ever give them, like before you started talking to him, did you ever give them any kind of just informal warning about lying to a federal agent? Because some agents do that too, because so listeners know it's actually, if you lie to a federal agent in the course of an official investigation, it's a felony. That's how Martha Stewart went to jail. That's how Marion Jones went to jail. They lied to FBI agents. And so it's a great tool because if you're on an official investigation and somebody agrees to talk to you, Mirandized or not, if they lie, they're committing a felony. A separate thing you can charge them with. So sometimes I would warn people, hey, just FYI, you don't have to talk to me, but if you do, don't lie because that's a felony. Did you ever do anything like that?
No, I usually, I can't say I never did. I mean, I'm talking hundreds of people probably, but what I would usually, when I approached a guy, my mind was like, you're allowed one lie to try to get yourself out of this pickle.
What?
Everybody's allowed one. You get one free card.
Okay.
And then I might slip in, if you lie to me here, you get yourself in a worse jam.
That's a good way to do it.
Yeah. And so sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. I mean, I charged several people with false statements over the years, but it often did. Yeah. Can I tell you something else now? Maybe I need to change this up a little bit. It usually works. But I always kind of figured just being a nice guy,
Yeah.
Everybody tries to get themselves out of a pickle once in a while,
My thing was similar. It wasn't like you got a freebie, but basically you kind of got a freebie if I knew you were lying, I challenged you, and then you corrected it. Then I'm like, okay, I'm not going to charge you. Yeah. But it's funny. I'm sure this was your experience too, warning or not. It always amazed me. I would give that warning, hey, if you are going to talk to me, don't lie. And the very next thing they said was a lie. It's like, I could never believe it. It's like you'd give them this nice warning. You're being such a good guy. You don't have to do these warnings for them. And they nod and they're like, I understand. And then you ask your first question and the first thing they say is a lie. And it's a lie because you're asking questions that you know the answers to.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, okay. So that sets a good setting for where you are. And you said that when you were interviewing him, he lied. What did he say? Do you remember?
Oh, he just basically said first off, he didn't know anything about wolves. He didn't know anything about is anybody shooting a wolf up there and trying to ship a wolf to Canada. He just flat out denied that. And then as information started coming in from up north, like, well, yeah, okay, yeah, yeah. Tom, he found that wolf in a fence, caught in a fence. Yeah,
Okay.
no.
Partial. Yeah.
It slowly eroded to some semblance of the truth.
Okay.
Or not eroded, evolved to some semblance of the truth.
Which was what?
That Tom shot a wolf, and that tried to ship it to Canada.
Okay, and Tom is his son. Tom
was his son. Yeah.
Okay. So, and somebody else is doing a warrant at the same time at Tom's house.
Yeah, Agent Furr and some others are doing the warrant over in Tom's house, and basically both he and Aaron, we give up.
Oh, really?
It was pretty straightforward. And of course, when they walked in, they see hanging on the coat rack a nice ski jacket with a white stripe down it. And
it's purple.
Yeah, and so it was pretty straightforward where this was going. And so they took his computer. They took, I think, a rifle or some other stuff, but couldn't find a skull. Couldn't find any of the remnants of the wolf there.
Okay.
And Tom made the comment that he burned just basically everything associated with that, and he couldn't remember what he did to the skull. Yeah. So it may be sitting on somebody's mantelpiece around there somewhere.
It was probably buried so it decompose or something. Yeah, it's sitting on somebody's mantle for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So you got a good confession out of Tom. What do you do next?
Of course, the computer forensics.
Yep.
And me knowing the computer forensics guy, I would get pieces and parts as we went. And there was just some gems,
Nice.
Law enforcement, you deal with cases that are bad and bad things people do to wildlife and bad things people do to each other, and especially the local cops and stuff. They deal with some horrible things, but every once in a while you sure find some humor.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was getting pictures, and here's a picture of Tom White, and I've sent you that one too, holding up a wolf,
Yep.
his arm around it. And it's not the one that's in the package. This is a different one.
Oh, you can tell. Yeah, you can tell just by looking at the pictures.
Yeah, it's a much lighter colored wolf, and one of the paws is almost chewed off, so it was caught in a trap.
Okay.
This or that, and it probably got shot.
Okay.
Sitting there in a trap trying to chew its leg off or just wounded. And so that was and then there were some more pictures of him posing with this wolf. And the paw, the destruction of the paw was pretty prominent. And so, we probably got a couple more here, at least. And so we got that picture. Then the Gmail search warrants started coming in. And the emails were just fascinating. This was on Bill White's stuff. And Bill was a guy, he he may still be around. I don't know. But he's a smart man. He was. But he wrote his correspondence in this hillbilly, cornpone,
like really conversational, right?
All saying, it was kind of difficult to read at first. It was almost like reading a foreign language, and then you start picking up on it. And he just wrote that way. That was kind of his trademark.
Can you remember an example?
Oh yeah, there was one email that he's writing. I think it was his brother, and he says, "Yeah, we was WZ." Well, seeing these wolves up here, or wolves up here. They've come in here now, and we seen 9 in one bunch, and that 9 turned into 7, and then it turned into 5.
Okay.
And he said, but I probably ought to stop. And I can't remember the exact language he used at this point. I could look them up and find them, but He said, I read somewhere that I probably need to stop because I read somewhere you don't want to put anything in an email that you don't want to read about on the front page of the paper the next morning.
Good. That's good advice, Bill. That's good
Like,
advice.
yeah, you probably should have followed your advice there.
Yep. So I
Yeah.
see what you're saying. So he would like say he'd actually spell out was WUZ
Oh,
or
yeah, it was, and yuns and yonders. And he just, it was,
character.
it was. He is a character.
Yeah.
He was actually a really nice guy.
Yeah.
He liked to kill stuff. And,
Yeah.
he was an interesting person.
Consequences catch up to people. Yeah.
They do.
They do. Okay. Okay. Now you got evidence of maybe more than one wolf being killed up on that property. Pretty clear it's not a hybrid now, and they're showing up on. He's saying they're showing up. They're showing up on camera traps in multiples. Yeah. That's not going to be hybrids. Okay, so are you charging anybody at this point, or what's next?
Oh no, we haven't charged anything yet. So
okay.
The other thing we got was there's just dozens and dozens of trail camera photos of not just wolves but predators in general, bears, skunks, and there was one that is kind of this forested area, a canopy over it, and they all seem to be in that same area. And there was one picture. There was mountain lions. Then there was a picture of an eagle, looked like either golden eagle or immature bald, underneath the canopy in this forested area on this trail camera.
That's
what in the world?
Yeah. Stuff walking by is one thing, but eagles landing directly in front of a camera, that's unusual.
So we got a baited site here.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. And they were baiting stuff in for their trail cameras or for more sinister reasons, which turned out to be the case.
I assume you're working your way toward a good case now, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's pretty apparent that this is going to result in some significant charges against everybody involved.
So
in the meantime, the press has kind of gotten wind of this.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, the state couldn't stay out of letting people know, and so other calls are trickling in. I'm get a call from a lady, or I get a call from a biologist who got a call from a lady that said, yeah, I live half a mile from Tom White, and I had a wolf that was licking his paw in my front yard, on May 25th or whatever day it was, so.
Interesting.
And sure enough, she was pretty close to Tom White's place, and so I went up to talk to this lady because we're still trying to get confirmation of the second, third, fourth, who knows how many wolves.
Yeah, right.
And so I go up and talk to her, and she was an older lady, lived by herself up there in the woods, and I showed her pictures of wolves, like the one that was being held up. That's not my wolf. She had names and everything.
Oh man,
not much came of that one, but except the trapping aspect was pretty interesting to me because it was obvious that wolf was trapped.
And did you find traps on the property or any evidence of trapping?
Did.
Okay.
We did. Well, I take that back. We found one that was fascinating. It was obviously a large trap, probably an old bear trap that had been modified with teeth on it. And I think I sent you a picture of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was in this spot that was later found to be a bait pile, or near there. So whether it was used or not, I don't know. But it was close when we found it. But
got it.
It was a powerful. It was somebody had probably tried to set that at some point.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was wicked looking.
It sounds like these guys kind of had their own little war on wildlife, not just wolves, but maybe other species too. Did you find any evidence of that?
They had pictures in this bait pile of bears, wolves, mountain lions. They'd hunted a lot of mountain lions. There was a lot of correspondence and pictures and stuff of mountain lion hunts. They took people on mountain lion hunts. I don't know if they were guided or whatever, but yeah, they didn't care for predators too much. And they had some livestock, but not like, they weren't Yellowstone showed quantities of livestock, 25, 30 cows or something.
Right.
But hunting was a popular activity for them.
Gotcha. Okay. Did they ever try to poison stuff too? I think there was something about poison, wasn't there?
This is what happened next is we ended up putting another search warrant together. We put together a search warrant for not just the houses and the outbuildings and the vehicles. We put together search warrants for the entire property.
Well, you were talking about 400 acres?
And we had 400 or 600. I don't remember the exact number. We did the entire property. And we, as you know, there is the open fields doctrine.
Yep.
If I'm in a place and I see a dead animal over there, I can hop the fence and go there and take a look at it.
Yep.
Without a warrant. There's no reasonable expectation of privacy in an open field.
Right. Open fields doctrine, basically, just so people know, allows law enforcement to go onto private property as long as it's an open field. And as long as it's related to a legitimate investigation, they don't need a warrant to do that. But to be safe, you got yourself a warrant to go on the general property, huh?
I did. We talked about it with the U.S. attorney, and he was initially open field, sounds like a good thing. But then we're like, we're going to have horses. We're going to have four-wheelers. We've got to cover a lot of ground here. What we're trying to do, we're trying to match the photograph of this wolf that, Tom's holding up, as well as some other pictures. We're trying to match those, and like where we saw the eagle and the bears and, where the trail cameras were. So we got to cover a lot of ground.
Yeah.
So we had a pretty massive team of agents to do this. And we did. We brought horses over and no, I think the horses came from Troy, I believe. But anyway, so we had quite a setup. We even had a command post in Twist with an old trailer. We set it up, and a couple of us manned that while, the other agents did the work. And then I had to write 2 search warrants while I was sitting in that command post for the whole thing.
Okay.
And, so we covered that area pretty well. And one of the things we found was the spot where those pictures of the wolves and the bear and the eagle and stuff were, and the trail camera mounted on a tree there. And there were bones everywhere. Deer, livestock, ravens, eagle skull, probably that same one. It was very apparent that there had been some toxins, some pesticides used there. And that goes back to those emails that we got. One of the emails was to a guy in southern Washington, and it says, "Thanks for the stuff to fight the yotes, YOTES. I bet their guts are rumbling." The big yotes, he told the big yotes, their guts are probably rumbling right now. And that's a pretty good indication that there was something ingested there. And for your listeners that don't know, sometimes people will salt an area. They'll put a carcass out or find a carcass, something like that, and they'll lace it with various pesticides. And it basically kills whatever comes in to ingest, feed on that carcass. And as they die, something comes in to feed on them, and it just expands. It just goes on and on, depending on what the toxin is, of course.
Yeah, and of course, yotes refers to coyotes, which, I'm always appalled by anybody who still uses poison to kill coyotes in the West in particular, because it does kill just about everything else. Yeah. A lot of protected animals, including bald eagles, ravens, all kinds of stuff, magpies, foxes, it kills everything indiscriminately. It's just a horrible thing. Okay. And a bone pile would definitely be an indicator that a lot of stuff was dying in that area.
Yeah.
Did you ever figure out if it was poison or what kind of poison they were using?
So when we did the search warrant on the property and on Bill's house and Tom's house, we had an agricultural inspector with us, and we found a coffee can with some granular material in it. And of course, we didn't know what it was at the time, but he later had it tested, and it was strychnine. Obviously not in a labeled jug, that says strychnine or gopher bait or whatever. It was just something he kept in a coffee can somewhere, and I have a feeling it was probably strychnine. Most of the animals were too far decomposed to,
Yeah, you couldn't tell.
be able to tell anything for sure. And we never charged anything with that. But he did not have a pesticide applicator's license, and it was stored illegally. I mean, we could have charged him with some state agricultural violations, but
Yeah,
at this point, it wasn't needed.
poison is so insidious because not only will it kill indiscriminately, but it'll get into the groundwater and things like that.
Yeah.
And, as an investigator, God, I dreaded running into poison anywhere because it'll kill you too.
Mhm.
And really scary stuff when you're out investigating poaching incident and you realize, oh my gosh, this is a poisoning incident, because up to that point you may not have thought about it and you may have already exposed yourself to the poison. Yeah, scary
And
stuff.
the long-term effects of that. How many agents that we worked with are
Hmm.
no longer with us that die from these horrible cancers and things like that? And a lot of those guys worked a lot of poisoning cases. And it really makes me suspicious of
Yeah.
what they were exposed to when they were working.
Yeah, no doubt. I remember in my academy class, the lab came out and gave us a special segment about, Temic and aldicarb and strychnine, and how, you breathe a little bit in or you even touch it with your hands ungloved can cause serious problems for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe years later.
Maybe years later. Exactly. Yeah. I was always very nervous about poisoning cases.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, what's happening next? Where are we going with this case?
So next we, of course, we get this search warrant done, and we never did find the spot where Tom was holding up that wolf. We did identify some people who lived on the outskirts of the property, and I went and did some follow-up interviews with them, and they all just spilled their guts. They had been observers of the whites' activity for many months, years, and frustrated because they didn't want to get their neighbor in trouble and bring trouble upon themselves. But boy, when we knocked on their door, it was like the door, the floodgates opened on some of them. And one lady was like, yeah, I remember back in December, we were sitting here and we heard this wolf just howl, and said, we hear wolves howling a lot, but it was just howling and howling and howling and howling. It was obviously in distress. And here comes the whites pickup up the road. Next thing you know, pow, and the howling stops. And I suspect that was that wolf that we saw, Tom holding up.
Interesting.
But sure, the dates and everything,
Match up.
Yeah.
So that would have been, that's actually would have been a great way to start this podcast, Corky, is to say, tell the story about the information you got in December of 2008. And yeah, it was this.
It probably would have been.
Yeah. Maybe I can edit it so it comes out that way.
There we go. Yeah.
We'll see. Okay, interesting. So the neighbors are now kind of telling you hearsay things that are confirming other facts that you already have. Yeah.
Yeah, and I talked to a couple of guys who contracted with the Forest Service to follow the Lookout Mountain pack around. Once it was established there was a pack of wolves there, everybody took a lot of interest in it.
Sure.
And they had run-ins with the whites, and these guys, man, their notes were just beautiful.
Nice.
And they had run-ins with the whites about, well, you're getting close to my property, you stay off of it, and that kind of thing, even though the wolves are right there. And,
right.
Now, these guys, they basically followed them around all winter, with skis and everything else.
Wow, cool.
Wow, to have. Yeah, it was pretty neat.
Very cool. Ah, that's cool. So was it confirmed that these wolves came down naturally from Canada, or did they come over? Okay.
This is what this was really got my attention. Is what this was several months. Those DNA tests, especially in depth like that, take a while, and they had to compare DNA from other packs around, and they were from the archipelago of British Columbia. So over there on the coast, these wolves had made their way, or a wolf, because they get kicked out of the den or out of the pack, and they'll go on a walkabout, and this one made it over the into the Cascades from the coast of British Columbia and then down into the Twisp area. So it was called an archipelago wolf.
Very cool.
That was neat.
That is super cool. One of the myths about wolves in the United States that absolutely drives me crazy is, you hear sometimes the anti-wolf people talking about how the wolves that were reintroduced that came from Canada into Yellowstone were larger than the wolves that naturally occurred in the lower 48. And, there's so many easy ways for an intelligent person to just disavow themselves of that rumor, because first of all, we know that wolves were killed in the United States. The last wolf, I think, was killed in the lower 48 in 1946, or maybe 1926. Those pelts are still around. You can do DNA testing on them and prove that they are the same species that we reintroduced from Canada. And it's not hard to know that, you look at photos, you can tell the wolves that were killed in the early 1900s are the same size as the wolves that are here today. But this is cool. There's a wolf biologist that used to work at UCLA as a professor. He passed away a few years ago, but he pointed out, this is fascinating. I think you'll love this. The movement of wolves, irregardless of humans, it was the Ice Age 10,000 years ago pushed wolves far south into North America. The ice sheet, there was no habitat for wolves north of what is now the northern part of the United States. So all wolves were pushed down into. So in reality, when the ice sheets retreated, it was North American lower 48 wolves that repopulated Canada.
Yeah.
So this idea that somehow Canadian wolves and historic U.S. wolves were bigger, smaller than each other is absurd. And there's so many ways you can just kind of, if you're an intelligent person who bothers to do even a minimal amount of research, that's natural for these wolves to be moving that way anyway. So the reintroduced wolves in Yellowstone, they're no different than the wolves that were here 100 years ago naturally, and what happened in Omak is the proof positive of that. These wolves move anyway.
No. Say one of the entertaining emails, and this was not from one of the whites. One of the entertaining emails is they knew some foreign. They knew where the wolves came from because this writer saw the game department employee kicking wolves out of the back of a Schwann's truck.
Okay, that's before marijuana was even legal in Washington. Now, where did that come
from? Yeah. You can imagine I got a chuckle out of that one.
Oh, my gosh. The things people will convince themselves of in order to confirm their own bias is astonishing.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. I'm going to jump in here just with a quick note. When Corky references a Schwann's truck, he's referring to Schwann's ice cream. For those of you who have never lived in the Pacific Northwest, you might not know what Schwann's ice cream is, but people who live there certainly know Schwann's because their delivery trucks are very iconic, painted yellow with a very fancy cursive writing of Schwann's on the side. That company has since been renamed Yellow, but I'm sure their trucks still look the same. Okay, back to Corky.
Okay, so we're running out of time here. We need to jump ahead. What happened? What happened to these people? Did you make a case?
So we presented everything to the United States Attorney's Office and came up with some charges and presented it to the grand jury. The grand jury immediately came back, and I'd have to look at the piece of paper exactly, but there was smuggling, there was Lacey Act felonies. Related to the false labeling, related to the export, conspiracy was one.
Right.
Conspired together to do this. There was a number of charges that came out against everyone involved.
My notes are you got a 12-count indictment out of the grand jury. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that was good. And Aaron, Tom, everybody was initially charged with felony violations. Had the suppression hearing on it. Nothing was thrown out. It was all rock solid.
Nice.
And eventually ended up settling on a plea agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom White ended up pleading to misdemeanor Lacey Act? Was it Lacey Act? Or no, but Endangered Species Act.
Okay.
Endangered Species Act, maybe a couple of them, two of them, I think. Aaron pled to Lacey Act misdemeanor.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody pled to misdemeanors except Bill. He had to take the felony on this. But, and nobody got any jail time.
Okay.
But they got some home confinement, probation, some fines, $10,000 to $20,000 in fines, that kind of thing.
It's pretty good.
So it was not, it's a wildlife crime.
Yeah.
Very seldom does the people get jail time for something like this. But
yeah, and
the fact you can't own a fire, can't have a firearm again, can't vote, those kind of things, that hurts a little bit. So.
Yeah, and I noticed in the notes you sent me before we talked today that some of these, there was hunting privileges restricted for a pretty significant amount of time. Yeah. Guns were forfeited. That hurts people who are interested in hunting. But more importantly, you got some good fines, $10,000, $20,000. I think there was a total of either $20,000 or $40,000 as restitution for the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah.
Pretty damn good.
Yeah, that was.
And like you said, there's a record now. So what we've talked about before many times on this podcast is when, you might be a little frustrated that you didn't get jail time on this first case you made, but you've laid down the record. If they show up again with another wildlife offense, particularly in federal court, that's when the heavier sentences tend to get laid down because judges don't like to see repeat offenders.
No.
And like you said, the record follows you around. And, we could have another discussion about how the sentencing guidelines impact whether or not somebody goes to jail. Wildlife sentencing guidelines at the federal level are painfully out of date. So
yes, they are.
Yeah. But you know what? Great case, Corky. I think this is a really interesting case to talk about in our discussion, our overall discussion of wolf conservation and wolf repopulation of the lower 48 United States. I think, great work on your part. And, wolves now have kind of pretty much moved their way back into Washington. Most of them coming from the original Yellowstone packs, just making their way west. But great work. Cool case. Anything else you wanted to say about it?
You were going to ask about, wolf reintroduction.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I don't know if we have time or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you, as an agent, as a hunter, as somebody who's lived in a lot of the western parts of the U.S., what's your view on wolf reintroduction and how it works in the bigger scheme of things?
I think they belong here. Now, do I think that they need to be coddled and protected and look at the nice wolf? No, I don't. I think that they're a reasonable hunting season, what have you, an allowance for some form of predator control for, livestock, because they do kill livestock.
Mm-hmm. They do.
And
they do.
Rancher should have a right to protect his livestock. Now, should he be able to go out and use 1080 or something, to do that anymore? No.
Yeah.
But, there should be some kind of reasonable regulation, but I think they're here. Now that we've gotten rid of a lot of illegal poisons,
mm-hmm.
They're not going away. And I'm it's not just as a hunter, but I had the privilege of tracking a lot of these wolves from the air. When I was also a pilot for
right.
I followed the one that started in northeastern Oregon and eventually ended up all the way over in California. And OR7, I think was the number on that one. And it was watching this whole migration and development. And it was fascinating to me. And I was glad to see they're here. And, you hear the misinformation, but then you read the official documentation and they're saying, they're wiping out all the elk. Yeah, they're probably moving them around. But
they're moving them around.
Like Idaho and Montana, the elk populations, the number of successful elk hunters has actually, the elk taken has gone up.
Exactly.
Since the introduction of wolves. They keep, they'll run them out of a habitat if they're eating too much.
Exactly.
It's just part of the cycle of nature.
Exactly. The fact that you can't drive up and spot a herd of 400 elk anymore and take your best shot at one of them is not, that doesn't mean there's fewer elk. It just means that they're changing their behaviors. Yeah. That's another thing that bugs me on the Mythbuster thing is, it doesn't take much energy to go check hunter success rates over the last 25 years. It's all available online or easily gettable from any of the Western states. And there's no, in terms of hunter success or number of tags issued, there's either no change or improvement in hunter success since wolves have been returned. So, yeah, I'm with you. Properly manage them once they're off the endangered species list. Don't slaughter them. But yeah, there's no reason why wolves can't be successfully hunted.
I wish that everyone could hear a wolf howl.
Yes. 100%. I agree. Yes. Nothing.
I heard it a few times, and it is just bone chilling, but it's fascinating. And it's a real treat to be able to hear that. And I wish that everybody could hear that.
It triggers something in your ancient DNA, doesn't it? Yeah. I've heard it too. And it is a very moving experience and one that I hope everybody has a chance to experience at some point.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, hey, Corky, thank you so much for being on again and telling us another fantastic story about your great work. You were an awesome agent, and I'm glad we're still in touch. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, my pleasure, Ed. It was great working with you when we got to work together, and I'm really glad we're still able to do it. So,
me too. Okay, everybody, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Nature's Secret Service is written and produced by me, Ed Newcomer, and is co-produced by the DHTV team here at California State University, Dominguez Hills. Follow us on social media and connect with us online at naturesecretservice.com.